Everyone, and welcome to today's presentation for Midweek Money Matters. We're going to be talking about teaching children to save in honor of tomorrow being National Teach Children to Save Day. I'm so glad to see you all here today. As I said, we are recording today's session. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the chat box. Otherwise, kindly keep yourself muted, and I will be happy to unmute you at the end. If there are any questions, we can go over them then. So without further ado, I think it's fascinating where one study showed that just 23% of kids said that their parents talked to them often about money. That means that 76% of parents aren't talking to their kids about money. And it's just my opinion, but I really feel like that should be switched. And maybe 23% of parents wouldn't talk to their kids about money, but that's another story. I'm so glad that you're here today so that you can learn about different ways that we can talk to our kids about saving money. And today we're going to talk about the kind of the best ways to teach our kids to save because there are an innumerable amount of different things that we can do to save. So I'm going to ask you in just a few slides about ways that can think of that we can help kids learn how to save. But in the meantime, we're going to be covering when the right time to start talking to our kids about finance. We're going to talk about the importance of leading by example. And then we'll get into 10 different ways that we can teach our kids about finance. But here's another interesting statistic. The National Foundation for Credit Counseling, just in 2019, said that 55% of adults graded themselves with an A or B when it came to their own personal finance. Again, that's a number that I think is way too small. And the importance of being able to stop and step back and actually talk about personal finance and ways that we can be better is so critically important. And that's one of the reasons that the Department of Banking and Securities has really jumped into this Midweek Money Matters series that we do because of the importance of always learning and reminding ourselves about personal finance and how we can make better financial choices. So let's start with the right time to talk to kids about money. And this is one where I'm going to be looking for some audience participation. I'd like to know what you think the right time is to start talking with kids about money. The answer really is the sooner the better. Whether that is, when they stop putting it in their mouths, ew, or if they're old enough to start asking for things. My grandchildren were with me over the weekend, and I was amazed that the 3-year-old was so interested in Barbies and she just wants more and more Barbies. So, is a 3-year-old who's starting to ask for things too young? Or maybe we think it should be until the kids are old enough to start to earn it. What are your thoughts on the right time to start talking with them about money? So we have one answer that when they start earning an allowance. Absolutely, I think that's a great time. And the reality is that young kids, 5 and 6-year-olds, can absolutely start to help around the house with family chores. Whether you choose to pay an allowance for that or not is certainly up to you. I know some parents believe that, kids should, you know, par- help out with chores automatically just because they're part of the family. And I think that's true, but we also have to start a conversation about how to deal with money, and an allowance is a great way to do that. So Flora says when they understand the definition of trade, when they want things. Absolutely. I think that's a great perspective. Rebecca says that With their 4 girls, they got money for their small chores and they had envelopes. I love that. And that interest at the end of the month is so important because that helps kids to understand how finance really does work. So let's talk about setting a good example, because setting a good example is so critical, and it's not always easy to have difficult conversations with our kids, especially when it comes to money. So I want to tell you about the Tang family. Um, with the pandemic, the Tang family had both parents lost their jobs. One parent was able to get a job really quickly, but they weren't able to make the same kind of money. And the other parent ended up having to stay home because the kids were now being homeschooled and or learning virtually. So someone had to be home with the kids. As a result of the financial loss, even though they had managed their money really well, they had decided to cut back on some of their expenses because they were still struggling to meet all of their financial obligations. So they started to consider cutting their cable bill and adding a streaming service instead of paying that monthly cable bill. They figured that would save them about $120 a month. They also decided to give up several of their printed magazine subscriptions and gave up their gym subscription in order to save another $50 a month. But instead of telling the kids that mommy and daddy can't afford to pay for all of the fun things, they were going to make changes because mommy and daddy were now broke or didn't have enough money. They actually had a conversation with the kids that says, instead of having cable that we really don't watch, we're going to start this streaming service that will give us where we can watch whatever shows we want whenever we want them. And this is going to help mommy and daddy save some extra money. Also, guys, instead of going to the gym, we're going to go to the park and we're going to play. And mommy and daddy will be able to run around the track that has the free exercise stations, and you guys can ride your bikes along with us. This is going to be a really fun way for our family to be able to stay healthy, get plenty of fresh air, and continue to be able to save some money. I hope that you were able to hear the difference in that conversation, as opposed to saying, we're broke, we never have any money, no, we can't do that. Instead of saying that, mom and dad turned that discussion and said, these are some really fun things that we can do in order to help us save some money. So it's important for us to know that having conversations with children about money is really important, but we want to be careful not to put that negative connotation. I remember as a kid, my mom would always say things like, whatever you do, don't tell dad how much we spent. And that just gave me such a bad perspective of money that it took me a while to be able to get to the point where I didn't have that same perspective. So it's really important that we have that conversation and make sure that those conversations with our kids are age appropriate and that we include them, because the kids may have some ideas as well. We also want to have conversations with our kids about the differences between needs and wants. But it's also okay to teach kids that while they need to have shoes, they don't need to have every single pair of limited edition, whatever brand. It's okay for us to tell our kids that we need to eat, we need to buy groceries, we need to provide for our nutrition, but we don't need to eat out at restaurants all the time. But it's also okay for us to tell our kids that if there's something that we really, really want, there are ways that we can save and plan to be able to do those things. So, We can help them to earn extra money. I know someone had explained that starting to talk to kids about money is appropriate once they're able to start doing chores. That's an absolutely perfect time to be able to start having that conversation. Having a chore chart, but also providing kids with extra things that they may be able to do in order to earn some of that extra money so that they don't have to it doesn't have to be for doing the things that they have to do every day, taking out the trash, clearing the dinner table. Those types of things are things that we do as a family because we live together, and you know how that goes. But also having things available that kids can do in order to earn that extra money so that they can save for the things they want can be really helpful. So we also want to talk to kids about goal setting. And there's an acronym, it's SMART goal setting. Basically, a goal should be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. So now I'm going to tell you another story about the Sullivans. The Sullivans are a family of four, and they decided that they wanted to take a day trip to Gettysburg in October of this year. They wanted to take a guided horse tour and have lunch while they were in Gettysburg. So they had to figure out exactly how much it was going to cost. So the goal then that they're going to set is specific because they want to take that day trip to Gettysburg in October. It's measurable because they can check the price for the guided horse tour, which was $92.50 a person. They can also figure they want to allow about $20 for lunch for each person. They know it's going to cost about $35 to fill their gas tank, and it should take just about a full tank of gas. Mom's going to buy some snacks at the grocery store so that they can save some money that way. And mom and dad are going to allow about $20 for each of the kids to buy a souvenir. So when they figured that all out, they estimated that the costs were going to be about $535 for the trip. So that was definitely measurable, right? So then the Sullivans had to ask themselves, can they save $535 in 5 months? And they decided that they probably could if they were careful with some of their other spending. So that's definitely attainable. Well, it's relevant then because the Sullivans love to be outdoors together as a family. They have enjoyed visiting historic landmarks in the past, and they've always wanted to try horseback riding. So that trip really is very relevant to the family. So timely. We have to think about the trip they're planning is on Sunday, October 3rd. It gives them about 22 weeks to save when they pulled out their calendar. So they plan their spending on a regular basis on biweekly paychecks. If the trip is $535, they figured out that they would need to save not quite $49 every paycheck. So they set up a separate special savings account that was scheduled to automatically transfer $50 into that account every other Friday. So by October 3rd, they had saved $550 and they had a great time out on the trail. But they talked about each of these different categories together as a family. And that was a really great way for the kids to start to see how working for the things that we want and planning how we're going to get there is a really great way to be able to do the things they want to do. So let's talk about the fact that the Sullivans ultimately decided on a plan together and they worked out how they were going to get to that goal. And each of them took responsibility in making sure that they did what they needed to do in order to reach that goal. So I want to talk about a place to save, because it's important that kids, we want to talk about the concepts, but how are we going to empower the kids to be able to do that on their own? Well, giving them a place to save. One of the comments that we had early on this morning was a mom who said her and her husband had given their kids an envelope for spending, saving, and investing. Well, having that place to save is really important. They have piggy banks out there that you can, that have different slots that you can sort of target to go into different areas. um, Whatever it is that you decide works for you and your family is important to be able to start and to implement. So giving them some place to save, whether it's an envelope, a jar, a piggy bank, whatever it is, having them start that process is really important. I actually just recently bought for my grandkids piggy banks that have spend, save, and give slots, and the kids, it's amazing to me to see how the kids are putting more money in their give jar, their give piece, than they are in their in their spending area, which shows me that the kids are really understanding the importance of being careful with our money and also helping our community. But let's talk about some lessons that we may want to have, some conversations we may want to have with our kids. What can we say no to today so that we can say yes to that bigger picture thing that we want to do at a later date? I'm going to talk about a couple of different options. I would hope that you will take some time to put in the chat box and Rebecca asked a question about her kids' spend jar, and as soon as they put it in, they want to spend it. Well, we're going to talk about how we can help kids to want to save. I love that comment, Rebecca. Thank you. So, this can be something that we have a conversation with our kids about. What are the things that we want to do in the future? Do we want to take that family day trip? Do we want to um, plan to take a big family vacation? Is there a pair of shoes or a video game? What's important to that child? Um, but we can say no today to buying snacks and drinks at the convenience store, and we can buy them at the grocery store because it's a whole lot cheaper to do that, so that you can say yes to those bigger things. We have one comment about McDonald's and ice cream and the little toy they get at the store, those small purchases. Absolutely. Those are great ways to be able to say no to this and be able to say yes to those bigger things. Thank you so much for that. When I first started doing budgeting for adults, one of the things that I realized was I was spending a whole lot more money on going to the convenience store than I had realized. So I stopped buying things at the convenience store, and I started buying my drinks and my snacks at the grocery store where it was infinitely cheaper. So what are some other things as you start to think of it? Go ahead and put it in the chat box and we can go through that as they come in. So let's teach them to deposit their savings. And this might help with having your kid be more interested in saving by taking them to the financial institution, teaching them to take that money that they've saved and deposit it so that they can earn interest is very helpful. So letting them have fun while they're learning to save. Some of these images here you can see where the kids are actually going into the financial institution and they're depositing their money. You see a little girl here in the bottom left corner. She's looking at a publication all about how she can open a savings account. And you can't see it because of the fly-in, but the gentleman here is withdrawing money the young man that you can't see, he's actually withdrawing money because he saved and saved until he got the money that he needed to buy the video game system that he wanted. Again, having them put that money into their account is really, really important. But another thing that we can do, and I think this is really cool because I think adults can really benefit from a spending log. Breaking it down and making the spending log more simple for kids can help them see where their money is going. So we want to keep it age appropriate for the kids, but a spending log basically itemizes every penny that you spend. In the case for kids, it's every penny. You can even have them do it every penny that they ask that they have mommy and daddy to spend. So, like Mr. Yawarski said, um, keeping keeping track of that ice cream, that's a dollar or two, but that adds up. And if we get 10 ice creams, that's $10. But if I bought the quart and a half at the grocery store, that's going to be $3 or $4, and I'm saving $6. Going through the spending log and showing them where having had saved that money adds up, and showing, that $6 every month can add up significantly to the point where they could actually get the game that they want. Again, keeping it age appropriate is important because kids need to understand exactly what we're talking about. Now, here is another option for those of us who are trying to teach our kids that they want to save. Much like employers offer some form of matching, if you have a for-profit company, often they have a 401k where they'll tell employees that they will match up to a certain percentage of money that's put into the 401k. Telling our kids that we will match maybe a dollar to every $10 they save can actually really encourage them to want to save more and more money. Now, when we start to do that, it's important that we're aware that if our kids do really well, we're going to have to, pay out that money. But I think that, one of the things that came to mind for me was, as kids start to think about driving, maybe telling them that if they save, X amount of money a year for their car, that we'll match a certain part of what they save. We want to make sure that it's not that the matching incentive isn't so far out that it becomes one of those things that's out of sight, out of mind. But we also don't necessarily want to have to pay it out every single time they save, but whatever works for you. But teaching kids to that will match that as they save it at certain increments can really make them have that self-control that they need in order to really start to save money. Now, it's awful to make mistakes, but I don't know about you. I learn from my mistakes much more easily than I learn from being told something. So when our kids decide to take all of the money that they've saved and go out shopping, and suddenly they have no money saved, but there's this really great thing that your kid wants to do. Maybe they have an opportunity to go do something fun with another family, but they need to pay their own way. If they've spent all of their savings frivolously or on some, if they just decide that's what they want to do and they don't have any money, that's a tough lesson to learn. But imagine if all of us had learned when we were 10 or younger that if we don't save our money, really special opportunities that come around we may not be able to do. So that's something that we can, allow our kids to learn when they're younger. But we can also teach them about borrowing. My son, my grandson wanted to make a purchase on a video game, and he only had $10. And my son said it was a $14 purchase. And my son said, "Okay, Caius, well, if I loan you the $4, you're going to have to do X amount of extra chores in order to pay that back. Plus, you're going to, instead of having to pay $4, you're going to have to pay me $5 because you have to pay me for me letting you use my money." This is a great way to teach kids about how borrowing money to pay for things is going to cost them. And they have to be aware of the cost that goes with that, because so many kids don't understand this when they're young. When they start to get all those pre-approved credit card offers in the mail, they don't understand the concept of paying interest, and they get themselves into a whole lot of financial trouble. My oldest daughter did this when she had just turned 18, going off to college. She ended up with like 6 credit cards, and she didn't listen. And by the time she had her associate's degree, she was very close to having to file bankruptcy because she had maxed out all of her credit cards because she didn't understand the interest and the cost that it was actually the expense that it was actually costing her to for all those little purchases that you make. So teaching them about borrowing and paying it back with interest can go a long way in establishing financial awareness in our children that can carry them long into their adult years. So as always, we always try to provide you people with resources that are available. Um, we always provide our office, the Pennsylvania Department of Banking and Securities. You can also visit the Financial Literacy and Education Commission, which is housed by the Federal Treasury. Their website is www.mymoney.gov. And then there's a really great article on US News. Um, the link is here. I'm happy to send you a copy of today's PowerPoint presentation. My email will be provided later. Hopefully, if you want that article, you can send me an email and I'll send you a copy of the PowerPoint, and I can send you the link to the article. But it really is really a great article about how we can continue to teach kids about money. So in the comments, if you would like, just tell me some things, some strategies that maybe you've thought of to help your kids learn about saving money, and we can talk about those as we wrap up. But our Office of Consumer Services is available to answer your questions and provide you with appropriate resources. That call is free, and they are available during regular business hours, Monday through Friday, at 800 PA Banks. If you have not already registered, I would encourage you to check out next week's Midweek Money Matters at padobs.eventbrite.com. We're going to be talking about first-time homebuyers and where we should start as we begin to plan that process. I want to thank you so much for your time today. My name is Katrina Boyer. I'm the Investor Education Coordinator at the Pennsylvania Department of Banking and Securities, and my email address is here along with my phone number. I'm going to stop the recording now.